Thanks, Hindol, for that fascinating lecture. And I now realize why you are considered as one of the most exciting thinkers on Hinduism in the country today. Your lecture will be on our YouTube channel, and viewers can click on the link below to hear the full lecture. Now we will move on to the conversation on the Astavakra Gita, on which you have written a book together with Vivek Devroy. The Astavakra Gita, as Thomas Byram says in his introduction of the English translation, is a text which starts where everything else stops. It's both fundamental as well as advanced in a sense. And in today's conversation, we will explore the parallels with Stoic philosophy and with the other branches of Hinduism. I look forward to talking to you.
Yes. Let me start with a personal question.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You are considered as one of the most exciting thinkers on Hinduism currently. To be a public intellectual in a world where interpretations of Hinduism can sometimes be even very wild, how does this responsibility sit with you?
Drawing from the lessons of the Astavakra Gita, I'm not taking the responsibility, I'm letting it be. No, let me give you a fun answer and a serious answer, right? The fun answer is that, look, we are in a world where anything can be extrapolated on anyone, anytime. I have written books which are, 600, 700 pages, and had people take photographs of one sentence and fought with me on Twitter. We're in a meaningless world in that sense, right? There is only, anybody who creates anything, not just write books, anybody who creates anything can either take the entire burden of responsibility of how it would be interpreted upon themselves, or they may humbly, say, as we say in Hindi, karvad, with folded hands say that, look, my point of view is limited to what you find in my work. Now, if you want to extrapolate and you want to project other things upon it, then that I am not going to answer on that. I can't. It's impossible. Anybody can read anything. That I write on Hinduism itself can be questioned by some people and said, oh, but why not on something else? But there is no answer to such questions, right? So I think the only thing one can do as anybody who creates anything is to be honest to their own art and craft and be honest to what they have produced. So I am honest to every word I have written in that book. But it is not my job to try and explain to every individual what they project on my work and what they read as interpretation of my work, whether that's true or false. I think that's too much of a burden to carry. However, having said that, I do admit that we bear a certain responsibility. And that responsibility comes from, again, to go back to what I have put on that page. I am responsible, and you can hold me responsible for every word that I have put on that page, including anything I may have said today or any of my other lectures. Anything I have put on that page or I have said, I am responsible for. But I will not take responsibility for a lot of projections that happen these days. So that's my sort of, answer.
Gets us started well. See, there are many Gitas. The Bhagavad Gita, the Astavakra Gita, and the Avadhuta Gita are some of them, right?
Yeah. There's a Devi Gita and the whatever. Devi.
Right. Now, the Bhagavad Gita has become the most popular, if I may say so, right? The Astavakra is relatively less known.
Yes.
Is this because the Astavakra Gita is rooted only in Advaita, the non-dual philosophy?
Yes.
Which is just one of the many schools of thought in the country.
6,
right? Even in the south, if we take the Acharya Trayas, Shankara wrote the Bhashya for Bhagavad Gita, Madhvacharya wrote it, and then Ramanujacharya also wrote it, right? So all the three acharyas have written the bhashyas for Bhagavad Gita.
Yes.
But the Astavakra Gita is an Advaitic philosophy, right?
Yeah.
So, in one sense, does the Astavakra Gita's appeal get narrowed
Yeah.
because it's concerned with only one school of philosophy?
Well, look, I mean, many would argue even the Bhagavad Gita is, essentially concerned with one school. Many would disagree also. Now, that's a debate. Why is the Astavakra Gita not better known? Why are there not more commentaries on it? It's a difficult question to answer, to be honest. And I would not pretend that I have an absolute answer to this, barring the fact that at least in more contemporary times, there have been people who have written commentaries. There's Nitya Swarupananda ji's, commentary, for instance, and translation. There is, of course, the Osho lectures. Many people may have listened to them. I also feel that the Astavakra Gita is so distilled in a sense and so stark that perhaps that in a sense is an impediment to deep or elaborate commentary. Because I think the overall sense of the Astavakra Gita, even when you're reading it as a reader, you feel, and I felt, and I think everybody who reads it will feel, it's a text that is telling you this is the final word. And there's anything you say beyond this, is just, you're just doing something that's not necessary, right? Therefore, to write a traditional commentary, and I grasped with that, therefore the question is, why would I write a book on the Astavakra Gita? Well, therefore, I as I mentioned in my talk, I think it's far more interesting to try and understand what and how they speak to us in our lives, right? Rather than traditional, all the commentaries that you mentioned, they are traditional commentaries. It's a bit like the Bhagavad Gita, of course, the most famous commentary in a sense in contemporary times of the Bhagavad Gita is the one written by Srila Prabhupada. Many people may have read it, called the Bhagavad Gita as it is, right? Now there you'll realize, if you've read it, what Srila Prabhupada does is, he takes every shlok, he translates it, and then gives an elaborate purport. He uses the word purport, right? He gives into detail, what he feels it really means, right? The Astavakra Gita in that sense is such a text that it is so distilled and refined that it's almost difficult to explain beyond that what it means, because it's telling you in absolutely crystal clear, distinct words without ambiguity what it means, right? Like, for example, let me give you an example about the Bhagavad Gita, for instance. The Vaishnavas would say the Bhagavad Gita is about Krishna. When Krishna says I, it means Krishna. Some others, from a different approach, would say, no. When Krishna says I, it means the Brahman. It means the divine, right? The unexplainable divine. Whereas the Vaishnavas would say, no, Krishna means Krishna. The Lord is telling you directly, it's me. Why would you extrapolate and say, no, it's the Brahman, right? Anyway, there is the Brahman, the Paramatma, and Bhagwan, right? This is Bhagwan himself saying it is me. So therefore, there could be perspectives to it, and therefore the need for deeper commentary, different people will interpret and so on and so forth. The Astavakra Gita is absolutely direct. It is just saying, you forget about all these things, you will get happiness. End of story, right? So in a sense, that could be an impediment to traditional commentary. Now, why, if this is the only answer, no, I don't know, right? But this could be, in my opinion, one of the answers.
There are 4 Mahavakyas in the Upanishads,
Yes.
right? The first is Prajnanam Brahma, which is consciousness is Brahman.
Yes.
The second is Aham Bramhasi, which is I am Brahman. The third is Tattvamasi, which is thou art that.
Yes.
And the last one is I am Atma Brahma.
Yes.
Right? Which is this self is Brahman. These are there could be more, but these are the 4 which are considered as the 4 Mahavakyas of the Upanishads, right? Now, the Astavakra seems to have a particular emphasis on Tattvamasi,
Yes.
right? So, why is that so? And can you also say, does the Astavakra Gita go a little beyond the Mahavakyas?
So this is a very interesting question, because I actually asked this, a similar question, not exactly this question, to again a monk But before I go into that story, let me tell you a fun story about the four Mahavakyas. And you know how these things happen in such fun ways in one's life. I once met this lady a few years ago, and there seemed to be a possibility that we would date. Until the lady told me one day that she wanted to get Aham Bramhasi tattooed on her wrist. And we got into a long, protracted argument that whether tattooing Aham Bramhasi on one's bodily self would mean that one has understood Aham Bramhasi or not understood Aham Bramhasi. Allow me to say that conversation became so protracted that our engagement sort of disengaged, as it were. Right? So this kind of fun things also happen in life. I don't think we finally came to a conclusion whether tattooing Aham Bramhasi on the skin means you understood it or you didn't understood it. So anyway, being that as it may. To go back to the question you asked, like I said, I asked a question like this to somebody, again a monk, and something very interesting. And it sounded funny at that time, but let me say this to you. And later on, I thought that that's probably true. The Astavakra Gita is basically saying, go beyond Vakya. So don't look to me for any Mahavakya, because I am going beyond any Vakya. So in a sense, it is considered to be the most distilled wisdom of the Upanishads, because in a sense, it seeks to go beyond everything, beyond any expression. One of the wonderful parts of the Astavakra Gita is where it says, I prostrate to myself. Who do I bow to? I bow to I, because there is nothing else. There is no universe. There is no my mind. There is no something else. There is no other. Right? So it seeks to go beyond any sense of distinction. Because, in order to even formulate a formulation, you need distance, because at the end of the day, somebody formulates, somebody absorbs, right? And this was the monk's answer also. If you think of any formulation, any great Mahavakya or anything that you may have heard, a scriptural text, whatever, a great profound saying, there is a creator and a observer or absorber, right? Somebody who has created that, somebody who's absorbing that. But what if there is no such thing? And that is the deeper question I think the Astavakra Gita is prodding us, in a sense, to ask.
So in one of the interpretations I heard that, like in an audience like this, there are many bodies, there are many minds,
Yes.
but there is only one consciousness.
Yes. And this consciousness is also very interesting, right? I mean, the Astavakra Gita in many cases says, what is consciousness? There's nothing. Now, and people who follow this, of course, you will know, for a long time, there's been research on this, on what is known as the heart problem of consciousness. David Chalmers, famous phrase. What is the heart problem of consciousness? We have still not cracked that, because a lot of people would say, scientists would say, there is no consciousness, right? At least we haven't understood. And monks would say, well, you thought there was no gravity until, there was gravity, right? So, but there is a lot of very deep research happening in, connecting string theory and lots of other things to try and understand what is this heart problem of consciousness? What exactly is it, right? And I humbly would say that my answer to a question like this on consciousness, not that you've asked me the question, but a broader question of consciousness is, we don't know. And we should, at the very least, people who engage with such questions, whether from a, textual side or from a scientific experiment side, should possess the humility to say we don't know. at the very least.
The Indian philosophical texts.
Yes.
Okay, it said you have to understand and engage with it at 3 kinds of levels.
Yes.
The first level is the Shravana, which is the listening.
Yes.
Right? Which means some of the texts like, the Puranas and some of these, which are slightly easier, you can listen and absorb.
Yes.
Then there is the next level, which is the Manana.
Yes.
Which is, you have to understand, you have to reason, and you have to engage with it in that form. Examples of this is, let's say, the Bhagavad Gita.
Yes.
But then there is the third level, which is called the Nididhyasana,
Yes.
which is truly, you have to absorb it only through meditation.
Yeah.
And the Astavakra Gita sits at that level.
Yeah.
Right? Now, for ordinary people like us, getting to that Nididhyasana
Yeah.
level
It's very tough.
is very tough. Right? Now, if you take Shankara, this is my
Yeah. Please.
projection. I mean, it's not.
No, please.
When he looked at the Prasthanatrayas, which is the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, and the Brahma Sutras, he distilled that essence to the Bhaja Govindam.
Yes.
Right? So, when he writes the Bhaja Govindam and he talks about, Satsangatve, Nisangatvam, Nisangatve, Nirmohatvam, Nirmohatve, Nischalatatvam, Nischalatatvam, Jivan Muktihi.
Yeah.
Right? Now, when he says that, it is rhythmic prose. Right?
Yes.
And for that generation, that society, that was possibly a way of bringing dense philosophical text
Into.
easy reading or easy absorption. Right?
Yeah.
Does the world of AI, which is your topic,
Yes.
give us any such hope with the Astavakra Gita?
No, absolutely. I'm hoping that people like me will do a lot of this kind of work, and AI will basically steal all our work and train a large language model, and it will one day churn back all of our words at us in a different format. We will all lose money and remain poor, and somebody else, Sam Altman, will become rich. By the way, Sam Altman famously tweeted. I'll give you your answer, but just as a funny anecdote, Sam Altman a few days ago also saw on Twitter everybody's very excited because in 2022 Sam Altman tweeted. They were doing a session on Twitter asking Sam Altman, tell us something that most people don't know or don't understand. And his answer, or one of his answers, was the Atman is the Brahman, in those words. So, there's hope for us yet, and there's hope for AI yet, but look, very humbly, let me just say that I actually feel a lot more engagement with these texts must happen, which brings them to our day-to-day lives. I think that's very, very important. I feel that my parents' generation had a sort of simple faith that my generation and people younger than me have lost. My mother just believes. She just has this belief, and she knows that, things will be okay. And oddly enough, no matter what has happened in her life, things have been broadly okay. Now, I'm not suggesting that there is any miraculous connection or anything like this, but I'm just saying there was a certain practice of everyday connection to a deeper consciousness that we have lost. Allow me to give you a very practical example of this. I always tell audiences which are younger than me, think about it. In my parents' generation, no matter what happened in our lives, we had money, we didn't have money, somebody was ill, something, I was failing in mathematics examinations, whatever was happening, whatever tragedy was happening in my lives, and I was not being able to crack IIT or whatever. The fact is, my father always took 5 minutes to do a little aarti before he went out to work, no matter what was happening in our life. My mother would do a Sandhya Puja for 10-15 minutes, no matter what was going on in our life. No matter who was coming to visit us, there was a certain rhythm of engaging with a deeper purpose. People would go to their neighborhood. I have seen my uncles, while going out to work, there would be a neighbor temple, they would just skip in, ring the bell, to prostrate themselves, say a mantra and go. With my generation and younger, that connection is broken. And I genuinely feel if you create a society where any connection to a deeper, higher purpose or consciousness, I'm not even using the word God, in keeping with the spirit of the Astavakra Gita, any deeper connection with a higher purpose is broken, that society cannot be sane. It is not possible. This is my humble submission. Human beings have to have even the slightest touch of a higher purpose, of a higher consciousness, to use that word, right? If everything is only material, then that society is doomed. And a lot of the, people keep telling me, a lot of my audiences turn around and say, oh, we are in a mental health crisis, especially, in America when I do tours and stuff, mental health crisis, opioid crisis. It's interesting that a lot of this kind of crisis will happen when you've broken away. This is not just about Hinduism, right? Look at Christians. My friends who are Christians, their parents, no matter what they did, they would go to church on Sunday for half an hour. This generation is not there. So unless you have some deeper moral higher purpose, if you break that, that's why I feel we cannot do what, the great masters, we don't have the poetic ability and so on and so forth. What we can do is humbly try to bring all of this into the context of our deeply flawed lives. We have deeply flawed lives. We are deeply flawed human beings. And yet, there is redemption possible for us if we are able to bring this wisdom in some small form into our everyday lives. It has to be, it's not just about, and I live in Delhi, where everybody, whenever you tell them about anything, they say, मैं तो ऋषिकेश जा रहा हूँ. मैं तो हरिद्वार जा रहा हूँ. That's all good. You can go to Rishikesh and Haridwar. But we have to find the answer. Oh, Rishikesh, Haridwar se aap wapas bhi to aayenge. You're going to come back to Gurgaon, right? And Noida and Delhi, right? What then? So it has to happen in our existing flawed life, in the contours of that existing. It cannot be one more escapist crutch, ki main Haridwar ja raha hu, right? It has to happen every day in our lives. And therefore, we must create processes to bring this knowledge and see how it applies to our lives.
Wonderful. About 2,500 years ago or thereabouts, the best of the Roman Empire at that time, right? And Marcus Aurelius was the Roman emperor.
Yes.
Stoicism was the philosophy that they adopted. He was mentored by Antoninus and Catullus and many others, right? The Janaka here, in some sense, had the benefit of a mentor mentor may not be the word, but at least a dialogue partner like Astavakra, right? There are lots of parallels between Stoicism and the Astavakra Gita.
Take non-attachment, for instance, right? The very fundamental, and that's a great question. And this is how I think with questions like this, we have to find common ground between cultures and texts and ideas, right? Absolutely. The Stoics fundamentally believed that non-attachment was a great idea, right? Now, you may, a theologian here would say, but did they exactly mean non-attachment the way we mean it in the Upanishads? Those are, I think, splitting hair, right? We must admit at least that they had a very great reverence for the idea of non-attachment, quite like a text like the Astavakra Gita has. Deep attachment to non-attachment, so to speak, right? Or deep reverence to non-attachment, right? So that's one clear, and there are others, of course, but that's, to me, a striking commonality.
Yeah. Among the many principles, one of them is they are us and we are them, right? And that's in Stoicism. Okay, I am now going to set of 5 rapid-fire questions. So you're
Karan Johar style. I don't think there's ever been a rapid fire on Astavakra Gita, but okay, chalo. ठीक है, ये भी सही है.
So the first one is, who would you rather be? Okay, Arjuna receiving the Bhagavad Gita from Krishna, or Janaka receiving the Astavakra Gita from Astavakra, or the common man who received the Avadhuta Gita from Dattatreya. You have to choose from the 3.
The first 2 seem so arrogant for me to even claim. I don't think, certainly I would not claim that I would ever even be able to be Raja Janak or Arjuna and whatever. I guess therefore the common person, I mean, in all humility, I must admit that the common person is the only thing that I can be. So yeah, that's my answer.
Second, okay.
Yeah.
Of course, your book is something you would like every one of us to read. But
One lives
if you
in
were
hope.
to,
One lives in hope.
so if you were to recommend one other choice,
Yeah.
okay, would it be Thomas Byram's Heart of Awareness,
Yeah.
or Nitya Swarupananda, whom
Yeah.
you referred to,
Yeah.
or the Osho lectures? You have
Yeah.
to give one of the three.
I think Nitya Swarupananda. Nitya Swarupananda also because, again, Nitya Swarupananda's book, if you read, the translation is very lucid. It's very lucid, it's very simply done, but it's powerful. Also, I think because the Astavakra Gita is very thin and it's very short, a lot of people see that Nitya Swarupananda's book and feel that, okay, theek hai, ye to uthai leta hu. This I can manage. Without really realizing what it is, but they feel that, okay, this is manageable. But I actually feel that the Nitya Swarupananda translation is quite, is very nice. But of course, if people don't want to read and they want to listen, the Osho lectures are interesting. You should. And if people only want to read in English with the context of the West, of course, Heart of Awareness is good. But I would suggest Nitya Swarupananda.
Third, one of the most memorable lines in J.K. Rowling's books is,
Yes.
For the prepared mind,
Yes.
death is the next big adventure. You have any such in your book?
No, so there's one in the Astavakra Gita. I alluded to it in my lecture. At the end of the Astavakra Gita, it ends by saying what is unity, what is disunity, right? And then it goes on to say what is this, what is that. And then it says, what is therefore the need to speak about all this? I find that really powerful. That, in a sense, it goes beyond, as I was saying, it goes beyond even the idea of philosophizing about these things, right? It essentially tells us that either you know and experience this in your life, in your heart, in your soul, whatever you want to call it, right? Or all this philosophizing and talking and whatever is meaningless. It does nothing. It's again a different kind of attachment. You need to feel that freedom and that's it. So I feel that is quite interesting.
If we look at a few other texts, okay, and I'll just pick three, okay.
Yeah.
Let's take Nietzsche's, Beyond Good and Evil,
Yeah.
or Sartre's Being and Nothingness, or Montaigne's The Complete Essays, right? And just picked three. Which of these comes closest to the Astavakra Gita in terms of its sweep and depth?
So if I may, if you'll allow me, I will choose the option. I'll take the Nota option because we're in election season, right? Allow me to take the Nota option and I will place my own candidate into this mix, right? I actually think if you really, this is a very interesting question. To me, one of the most, profound pieces of spiritual text or scriptural text, which speaks profoundly to the Astavakra Gita. If many of you may have read the Heart Sutra in Buddhism, right? Gate, gate, param gate, bodhi swaha, right? That, if you drill down into that last bit of the Heart Sutra, what is it saying? It is saying gone, gone, gone beyond, right? Gate, gate, right? Gone beyond to the other shore, right? And here is awakening. Here is enlightenment, right? So you travel, travel and go to the, there's this beautiful Mexican poet who I really love, right? Who wrote famously, path maker, there is no path. You make the path by walking. By walking, you make the path. It's a bit like that, right? And this last bit of the Heart Sutra has always really spoken to me. And I think it has profound reflections of the Astavakra Gita. Of course, the Buddhism, somebody, again, a theologian would now say, well, the Buddhists don't believe in the Atman and this, that, and the other. Absolutely, sure. But it's just this idea that it's, gone, everything is gone, everything is gone. And on the other shore, when you leave behind everything else, what awaits is awakening. I find that incredibly powerful, and I think the Astavakra Gita speaks very powerfully to it.
So the nota wins.
Well, the audience should say that.
So my last question before
Please,
I go to the...
please.
If there is one person
Yes.
For whom, I'm talking about world leaders, huh?
Yes.
For whom the Astavakra Gita should be mandatory reading in today's times. I have a list of 3, but I won't ask you that list. I'll leave it to you to choose who needs it the most.
No, can I please have a list? Because I know where all of this is headed. And this is coming from Delhi. My antenna is always up for, trip questions in election season, No, look, who should read the Astavakra Gita among world leaders? Okay, let's take an example from, current affairs, so to speak. I think, and I'll give you the reason also. I think Benjamin Netanyahu, right? Why? Because remember, if you read about Netanyahu, he actually, when he was in MIT, he used to call himself Benjamin Nit. Now, anybody who knows the history of that region, it's from that fabled Mount Nit, right? And his own philosophical understanding, which sort of then came into politics, comes from a very famous Judaic preacher called, I believe his name is, if I can remember correctly, I think it's Mendel Kirschenen or Kirschenen. My pronunciation might be wrong, but this is an epic Judaic religious figure who influenced many, many politicians, and most profoundly Benjamin Netanyahu, right? So clearly he's a man who has all these spiritual influences that have impacted his life and have, had a profound influence on him. So I think he, therefore, as somebody who was already engaged with spiritual literature before, would be a good person to read it. Now, please don't ask me, what would that do and what would happen if he reads it. I don't want to get into that. But I think that would be a good answer.
Hindol, thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. I'm very, very grateful to all of you. I really did not think, thank you.